Hey guys, thanks for being here with me today. I'm going to be going through my October Halloween reads part 2, even though it is now November. I'm a few days late, but that's okay because I was able to read 6 more kind of spooky, scary, in the spirit of Halloween books. If you saw my part 1, I think I got through 8 or 9, so I did pretty good this year for Halloween. I'm going to talk first which of these 6 books. Let's do the one that took me literally 5 minutes to read, and that is Fangs by Sarah Anderson. I'm not being facetious. This is, would you classify this as a comic book or a manga? I do not know how the subtle differences and how those are defined. But this is a romantic story between a werewolf, a man who's a werewolf. Well, he's not a man, he's a male who's a werewolf, and a female who is a vampire. And it just takes you through initially them meeting and then as they start dating and falling in love, etc., etc. And it just has some kind of like amusing, it'll make you laugh. It's supposed to be just like an entertaining quick read, and that's what it was. It was fine. I mean, I struggle to rate things that are this short just because I don't know, but it was fine. It made me chuckle a few times. So the next book was also very short, Sour Candy. Look at that cover. So I went into this book, I'm pretty sure I didn't read the back of it because it's so short, I didn't want much of it spoiled. But I feel like I read a blurb that this was about a man who kidnaps a child. And I don't know if I was confusing that with a different book I had, because I started reading this and I kept waiting for the kidnapping to take place and it never did. 4 months to the day he first encountered the boy at Walmart, the last of Phil Pendleton's teeth fell out. That's a pretty good intro line. So this is about a man, Phil. I don't want to give too much away because it is so short. But it starts with Phil. He's at the grocery store. He sees a mother and her son, and the little boy is like throwing a fit. And everyone is kind of doing that thing where they're like looking at them and judging and being like, man, she should really discipline that child. He needs to stop screaming. And the mom just looks kind of blank and empty and really worn out. And on the way home, he's driving home, the woman crashes into him with her car and then commits suicide. After the crash, everyone thinks that this little boy is his son. The police, his ex-girlfriend, what was his fiance, his family, and the rest of the book is kind of, you know what? I'm not gonna say what the rest of the book is. I don't want to give too much of it away. It had hints of unsettling moments in it, and as a whole, it was pretty entertainingly written, but I will say, I don't think it lived up to the cover. Like, I saw this cover and I'm like, that's gonna be a scary book. It was fine. It was fine. Let's go. Since we're doing let's do shortest to longest. That seems to be how we're going. The Mist, Stephen King, The Mist. Stephen King. It's so funny because his books, I feel like I've read quite a few of them. I mean, he's got like hundreds out, so if you're looking at his full catalog, not a lot. But I've read 10, maybe 10 of his books, and it seems to go the ones that I think I'm going to really enjoy and I end up not enjoying, and the ones that I'm not so sure about, I'll give like 5 stars. So The Mist was a 3-star. Why do I always forget the main characters' names? David lives in Maine, of course. All Stephen King's characters live in Maine. He and his son Billy centers around them. So there's a storm in the area of Maine that they live. Really bad storm, knocked down some trees, there's damage. David takes his son Billy into town to kind of go look around, see what the damage is. They need to pick up some groceries because everyone tends to panic in these situations and buy up all the food. I think he needs to send like a letter or something. It doesn't matter. Goes into town, goes to the grocery store, and they get trapped at the grocery store by the swift arrival of this really thick mist. And it doesn't take them long to discover that there are creatures in the mist and they are not very friendly. The real horror for me in this book is how quickly people can turn, like how quickly panic and fear can turn people into monsters. So the actual monsters, like the creatures in the mist, isn't the scariest part of the book. The people in the grocery store, there's of course this religious fanatic woman who starts panicking and talking about this is judgment day and you're all gonna die unless you follow me, yada yada yada. And people start to believe her way too quickly and start following her and are willing to like sacrifice people to the mist. Like, that is scary because people are that stupid. Not religious. I'm not saying religious people. I'm saying like the fanatics that like are ruled by, they get their power from inflicting fear on others. So it's the struggle. Let's go out in the mist. Do we stay here? Should we try and escape? There is one thing I did want to talk about with this book, and it's just, I'm kind of inviting talk back from you guys because this kind of confuses me more than anything else. I've noticed it in a few Stephen King books. He likes to add random like horniness in here. So David is married and his wife is back home, and as things start getting worse and worse, he has to come to the realization like she might be killed. And it's barely been 24 hours that they've been stuck here, and he ends up sleeping with one of the women in the store. Like, what? Why do you say, oh, I'm scared, I'm terrified? I have my young, like 8-year-old son here. My wife, she might be alive, she might not. We have bigger things to think about, but I'm gonna choose now to have an affair. Like, he did that in The Cell. I complained about it when I read The Cell too, because it's like this older man in his like 40s thinking about like a 15 or 16-year-old. Like, I remember this part specifically. Like, she was covered in her mother's blood because she had to kill her mother that morning. She goes upstairs to change, and he thinks to himself like, this must be serious because I'm not even thinking about her undressing or naked in my mind. And I'm just like, what is with all these Stephen King male characters who randomly get horny when they're about to die? Like, is that a normal effect that it has on people? I don't know. I mean, I've never been in a life or death situation, so who am I to judge? I don't know. It was weird. It was fine. I mean, it was 3 stars. I did watch the movie first. I watched the movie like many years ago, so if I hadn't watched the movie, I might have rated it a little bit higher, but for the most part, the movie does follow this pretty closely, so there weren't like a ton of surprises. All right, let's go to the worst read for me personally this month, and one of the worst this year maybe, unfortunately, and that is The Deep by Alma Katsu. I have a lot of things that I really didn't like about this book, but it started out so promising. So this is about a girl who's a maid, I think. Are you a maid? What's your name again? Annie. Okay, so this essentially is about the sailing of the Titanic and then the sailing later of the Britannica, which I guess were like twin sister ships. Annie was on the Titanic when it sunk. So we have kind of dual timelines, and we're going through each of the trips. We have like 6 POVs. Some of them are given more time than others. Only 2 of them feel necessary. There were some that I'm just like, why do I care at all about this character? I don't. Please get back. Even Annie, I really struggled to care anything about Annie. Like, she's this nothing of a character. Okay. This is what happened when I really dislike a book, is I lose my train of thought and all the things I didn't like come out at once. So I'm just gonna let it happen. I forgot that this takes place on a ship. You would think that at the very least this would be really atmospheric, because it's taking place during the sailing of the Titanic, which is so famous. You would think, okay, you're going to bring some haunted, maybe some supernatural elements into it, make it really creepy. At the very least, I'll learn about some random facts about, how a ship is sailed or what life is like on a ship, etc., etc. No, this could have been in a desert and I would not have known the difference, let alone the difference between the 2 ships. I kept confusing the timelines because Annie is the same nothing character in both timelines. You'd think going through something so traumatic, such as the sinking of the Titanic, surviving that, might have changed her a little, her personality, or maybe how she reacts to being on a ship or how she reacts to people. No. There's this complicated love triangle. She immediately falls in love with one of the men who's married and has a child, who's sailing on the ship, and becomes obsessed with him for no reason. He's not even that interesting. There were a lot of rich characters that were just there to make you hate rich people. There was nothing scary about this book, zero. The book starts with Annie in a mental institution, and it's like she can't remember her past. And one of the maids that was with her that also survived the Titanic sent her a message inviting her to apply for a job on the Britannica. And suddenly, maybe I'm getting this point wrong. Maybe I confused this. But to me, it seemed suddenly I can remember my past. Oh, that's who I was. And I just remembered I survived this horrific incident. So I'm immediately gonna go and get on another ship. If all those many complaints didn't clue you in, I really struggled not to DNF this book. And I am sorry, I try not to go all negative, but I really just didn't like anything about this book. I usually try and find something. I was really excited when I found out it was going to be adding some type of supernatural element to the Titanic. That's a great idea. You can do a lot of really cool. I mean, it is a real-time tragedy. So I don't want to be oh, it's cool to talk about how, all these hundreds of people died in terrible ways, but you can do a lot of interesting things, I guess, with adding supernatural elements to things that have happened in real life. And this just didn't do anything for me. So I think I gave this a 1 star. I feel really bad giving books 1 stars. I don't do it often, but some people really like this book, and I'm really glad that those people did. And I went on Goodreads. Sometimes after I finish reading a book, I'll go on there with my opinions already formed, just wanting to know if other people had, the same reaction as I did. Or in this case, I had such a negative reaction that I went on to try and find some positives. But for a lot of the things that other people mentioned they like, it just didn't resound the same way for me, unfortunately. I did hear really good things about one of her other books, so maybe it's not her writing, maybe it's just this book wasn't it for me. Next book we're going to discuss is Those Across the River. This follows a couple, Frank and Eudora. I can never remember the characters' names. So Frank is a veteran who was injured in the war. He has PTSD. He has really bad nightmares of the war. Eudora is his girlfriend. She was, I think, married or engaged to another man, but then they met and fell in love, so she broke it off with him. She's with Frank now. And because the person she was dating was in a high position academically, Frank isn't getting a lot of job opportunities where he is. He's really struggling to find work. So when he finds out that a distant relative, I don't think he's ever met before, leaves him a house in Georgia, they decide to move. So in this letter, this relative says, you know, the house is yours, you can do whatever you want with it, sell it, and you know, do what you want with the money, but please, no matter what, do not move in, do not live there. Contrary to her wishes, they decide they're gonna move in and they're gonna live there because Frank's great-grandfather lived in that area. He had a plantation, and his story is kind of famous because he was a really evil, cruel man whose slaves rose up and killed him. And Frank wants to write a book about him. So they move into this town, and it's a small town with kind of old-fashioned values. And the people are mostly friendly. There's a few weirdos in there. But there's a rule in town that you don't go across this river into this forest. People kind of steer clear of it. And the town also has a sort of ritual. It's like a religious ritual, and that every year they would release pigs into those woods as like showing that they're grateful to God for another year's harvest or something like that. That year they decide times are tough, food is scarce, we're not going to release those pigs, we're going to keep those pigs. Bad things start to happen. A child, I think, is the first to be killed in rather grisly manner, and then a family, an entire family is killed, and things kind of escalate from there. Now, this book was kind of a mixed bag for me. It did take a while to get going. It lingers a lot on Frank's dreams. As I mentioned, he's got really bad dreams about his time in the war. We get like 10 dreams of his. We're also given a lot of scenes of the couple's sex life. They're in love, they're young. Hey, it's great. I'm glad you guys have a healthy relationship. But it seems like every other chapter, we're getting a new scene about, oh, she's so beautiful. Her body is like a sphinx or minx, or I don't know what he compares her to. It's weird. It's not weird, but I don't need to hear about it all the time. Like, I wanted the more horror elements to stand out more, and once you hit halfway, the scary scenes, there are some scenes that get unsettling and that get like really gory at times. I remember reading one scene that just like, ugh, grossed me out. I don't like tearing flesh. I don't like descriptions of cutting, slicing, stabbing. I did struggle just a little bit with the kind of the big bads of the book. There's a group of them, I will say. I'm not giving that much away. That's apparent pretty quickly. The main antagonist, we are given the reasoning behind his actions, and it does make sense. But there's other people involved with it. You don't really get why they're going along with this stuff. It did have a turn that I did like as far as like what they actually are. I wasn't expecting that, and I did like it. The final confrontation, the author did feel like he was kind of revving up towards it, and then it was just over, and you're like, oh, that's it. So that was a little disappointing. I will say I did like the last chapter a lot. Not many other people did, because I did read some of the reviews and people were bashing it. I quite liked it. It kind of had this ambiguous open ending, which I tend to like. So this one, it was fine. I'm saying that with all of them, but a lot of them this month were just like, other than my one really negative reaction, The other ones were, I feel like they were like all 3 stars. It's like I enjoyed reading you, but nothing really, it might not stick with me for a long time. All right, the last book we're going to discuss is probably my favorite of the bunch, and that is Final Girls by Riley Sager. This I would probably, though, label more as a thriller, not quite a horror, but that's just kind of my personal opinion. This follows a girl, Riley. No, Quincy. Where did I get Riley? Was that one of my other characters, Riley? I don't know why I was thinking, oh, Riley Sager. I'm like, where did that random name pop in my head? Quincy. Quincy is a final girl. If you've watched a horror movie, you know what a final girl is. They are the last person left alive after all the friends have been kind of gruesomely met their ends, usually partying in the middle of the woods, acting like idiots for some unknown reason. Now, Riley had gone to a cabin with her friends when they were in college to celebrate being finished with school or something, and everyone had been massacred that night except for her. There was a man that escaped a nearby mental institution that was he still in prison for it? I can't remember that part of it. Quincy does not remember the full night. She's missing like the last hour of it, but she was saved by a cop whose name I cannot remember. Coop the cop saved her, and she's kept in a kind of trusting relationship with Coop. She texts him all the time, calls him all the time. He's really like a rock support system for her. She's living with her boyfriend. She's got a cooking blog and things are going pretty well. She is unfortunately in the public eye. The newspapers and the medias are obsessed with these final girls, and there's 3 main final girls in the US, and they're always trying to get pictures of them or figure out like, what are you doing with your life now? What happened? Will you do an interview? Yada, yada, yada. Do you want to write a book? So she's always being pestered. And one of the final girls commits suicide. And soon after, the second final girl, whose name I don't remember, I'm not even going to bother looking, arrives at Riley's apartment and decides she's going to stay for a bit. And it seems like she's homeless, and she's kind of destructive personality. She seems to need some help mentally and emotionally. We go back and forth between the present time and that night at the cabin where Quincy, she's tried to remember all these years. She can't quite remember what happened, how she survived, how she got out. But as the book goes along, we kind of get closer and closer, and she starts remembering new things. At the end, we're finally told what happened that night. Is the person who's in jail, or what, was he killed? Did he commit suicide? I can't remember that part. Was he actually responsible? Did Quincy have something to do with it? Was she a complete victim? All those questions are answered. I really like the answers that were given. I feel like there are several red herrings that are used pretty effectively. Again, the writing was good. The pace was lacking in some areas, but mostly decent. It kept you, especially as it started to go along and you started flipping timelines, it started to build. It's a solid thriller, definitely nothing to complain about. I would like to read more Riley Sager. I know he's written quite a few books. I'm sure I've got more of his on my shelf. So those are the books that I read. Where's the other one? Hold on. Boom. October Part 2. Pretty good, not bad. Pretty good, not bad. That's how I describe a lot of things. Anyway, guys, let me know if you've read any of these ones. Especially, listen, if you read this one and you really liked it, tell me why, because I love when people love books that I really didn't. So tell me why you liked it. Enlighten me, please. Thank you for being here for my spooky reads. You can check out Part 1 if you haven't yet. Hope you guys are reading a good one. Let me know. I will talk to you guys later. Bye.